Hey there folks, Zane from the Infinite Jukebox, aka the #1 Bondage Fairies fan, here with another quick album review, and today I wanted to talk about the new Gesaffelstein record, Gamma. Technically this is Gamma in all caps, but I'm just getting over being sick, so I don't feel like screaming into the microphone to shred my vocal cords. Mike Levy's time spent working under the Gesaffelstein name has brought out some of the most subtly influential electronic music of the past 15 years or so. I mean, 2013's Aleph is an inarguable classic at this point, and his production on records like Kanye West's Yeezus allowed a more harsh and industrially influenced style of electronic music to become applicable to larger mainstream audiences. I mean, I'm not saying that bands that sound like Throbbing Gristle are out here getting huge on TikTok or anything like that, but I will say that as a whole, the guy's impact has allowed at least some degree of shift within the mainstream, while also providing some of the most interesting and innovative post-industrial sounds within the more niche realm of the electronic music nerd kind of fan base, which I technically am a part of. In recent years, however, a lot of the hype surrounding the Gesaffelstein project has kind of died down. On one hand, you could partly chalk that up to the fact that some of the more popular records that Levy has been involved with, like that aforementioned Kanye record, have since had sounds that have been taken further by other artists or taken in other directions that have more heavily impacted the mainstream in the present moment in some way or another. But at the same time, I mostly think that has to do with his sophomore studio album 2019's Hyperion, a mixed bag of a record that kind of found itself receiving equally mixed quality from his fan base, from critics, from the electronic music scene at large, so on and so forth. It was an album that just wasn't great overall. I mean, that record even got a 5 out of 10 from Pitchfork. Do you know how hard it is to get below a 6.7 from them? But look, that's a discussion for another day. But my point is, Gesaffelstein. Hype kind of died down. Gamma, new record. It's here, and hey, I like it. Now, for a little bit more context, coming out in the same year as Hyperion, there was a little EP that also came out in 2019 from Gesaffelstein called Snovo Sonic System. It's this EP that kind of took on some more synth punk influences, and while I wouldn't say it's perfect or even great, it definitely was an unexpected turn for Mike Levy's sound under this particular name overall, and I was kind of hoping that maybe something more would be done with that abrasive side in the future, and that is thankfully exactly what Gamma manages to do. Much of Gamma does have a punkish edge to it tonally, which can especially be heard in a lot of the buzzsaw-esque synths that are pretty easily found throughout this record, especially on tracks like Hysteria that really do highlight the more intense and aggressive side of Levy's style of composing, style of producing that can be found throughout some of his harsher projects like this one, and they managed to kind of meld that sound with his more restrained kind of side to make something that doesn't ever really feel messy, but at the same time certainly does embrace just the right amount of impact, the right amount of violence almost in terms of how it presents itself. I think you get my point. It manages to come across as practiced and controlled and not just a garagey mess that was made for just the sake of being a slightly more synth punk based album. However, this record also doesn't really dismiss the more industrial and ambiance focused side of the Gesaffelstein name up to this point either. This isn't a total 180, it's more like the 150, 160 maybe. Tracks like The Perfect have this dark atmosphere and general sense of detailing in said ambiance that really do shine the sort of lingering cold feeling that you do get from a lot of Levy's past works, and the record manages to never really feel one note either, with some interesting more ballad-like moments throughout, like the track The Urge, as well as the entirely ballad-like sort of melancholic synth-pop track Lost Love, which it kind of feels oddly reminiscent of Papa Was a Rodeo by the Magnetic Fields. I don't know if that's just me. Maybe I just like the Magnetic Fields. These all give a sense of variety to the track list, which is great to see because while I do enjoy this album, it is something that could have easily been fairly one note in nature had Levy not taken the time to provide that splash of color, if you will. In a brief runtime of roughly 27 minutes doesn't hurt either. There's practically no way that this album could overstay its welcome, so it was really up to him to make sure that it didn't feel the need to be longer or anything like that, and I don't think this album needed to be longer. As odd as it sounds, nearing EP length is honestly about as perfect of a length for Gamma as you could possibly get. I really do feel like this does highlight this new creative direction for Gesaffelstein as a project. It really does highlight the variety of sounds that Mike Levy is going for on this record, and it highlights all of them very well, while also ensuring that the very few and far between, but still somewhat noticeable weaker moments, most notably the pretty much entirely forgettable and fairly thin 2-minute track Psycho, don't really have a huge amount of impact, despite actually managing to take up a bit of the track list's runtime, roughly, I'd say maybe 4 or 5 minutes overall, because they are just kind of in and out, and the second that you realize that you're not really feeling them, you get to move on to something that's probably much more exciting and interesting. Gamma may not be the most groundbreaking Gesaffelstein record to date due to its willing experimentation with decades-old sounds that were pioneered by bands, groups, artists like Frontline Assembly and Nervous Gender alike, but it does manage to sort of expand upon Mike Levy's overall style, his synth punk side especially, which is something that I feel is very refreshing and almost acts like a new beginning after a fairly disappointing sophomore studio album 5 years ago. Do I think that the hype behind him, the passion that was behind him at one point will ever build up to the same level again? I mean, it's possible. I've seen stranger things happen in the course of the couple of years that I've had this channel, so I mean, maybe, whatever. But also, probably not, and I don't really think this record's going to win a ton of people over who kind of lost track of him those years ago, but at the same time, if you are still paying attention, which you should be, then this is a good synth punk record. This is pretty exciting coming from him. It's nice to see him expand upon an EP that I honestly think no one really paid attention to 5 years ago. And yeah, I just like this one. It's good. I'm going to give this record 3.5 stars out of 5. With that being said, that is the end of this quick album review. I've been Zane from the Infinite Jukebox. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.